The accountability comes from the concept of a covenant.
Mm-hmm.
We don't usually talk about covenants today, except unless we talk about marriage, maybe something to do with the HOA, just stuff
Covenant,
like that.
I don't agree to.
Yeah, but covenants were a huge part of the forming of this country.
Yeah.
Like when the first settlers came here, when they were forming governments, they called them covenants because they saw it as a covenant between the people, God, and the ruling authorities, right? It was this agreement that was taking place. We're going to do this as the people, government, you do this, protect our rights and liberty, keep us safe, and we're all going to acknowledge that God is over all this, right? So that's the basic idea of a governmental covenant. And it bled into it. That formed the foundation that ended up creating the Declaration of Independence that, in my opinion, as it states what government's supposed to be, talks about the people, but then it acknowledges God's authority. It is one of these types of government that then created the foundation for our Constitution. So we get this idea, though, in the Bible, and we see it in 2 Kings chapter 11:17, where it says, "And Jehoiada, who was the high priest, made a covenant between the Lord and the king and the people, that they should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people." So something really interesting about this concept of covenant, the principle here, is that if the king obeys the terms of the covenant, but the people don't, then the king, his duty is to hold the people accountable.
Yeah.
You know, stop
as
crime.
a servant to them.
Right, as a servant. And he's been given the sword, like we saw in Romans 13 in our last episode, to punish evildoers. And he has the authority to reward good, promote good, those types of things, right? So if the people don't hold up the terms of the covenant, then he has to hold them accountable. He has to hold the people accountable. Now, on the other flip side, if the people obey the terms of the covenant, but the king doesn't, then the people are charged to hold the king accountable. So,
or the public officials,
or the public official,
whatever,
or the government in general,
yeah.
right? So all of this is the idea that all are under the law, the rule of law. This concept is really explained well in Samuel Rutherford's book, who was he was a Protestant but Puritan in the 1600s, and he wrote a book called Lex Rex, which means the law is king.
Law is king. Yep.
Right. It's a hard read, but it's important, and I would encourage our listeners, encourage you, try to read it. It's one of the things that influenced our founding fathers, but it's this huge argument from a biblical perspective against the divine right of kings or the divine right of governments to say that they have absolute power.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I love just the title of the book, Lex Rex, is kind of like it's a play on Latin, because it's, instead of saying Rex Lex, which would be like the king's laws. Right. It's saying, no, like you just literally flip them. It's like the law's king. Right. You know, the king is subjugated to the law, which is, I just love that. It's so fun. So yeah, that's this whole idea of accountability, though, that you have the hierarchy of government, God, the people, the law, the king, or the governing officials. But then you have the idea of covenant in that you have this balancing out, holding accountable people who step outside the covenant, step outside these terms. And again, in our country, that would be the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. That's the king, if you will, that has authority over governing officials and people. Cool. So, given that this podcast is supposed to be about liberty and not government, technically, although it is about government also. Yeah. This, though, just on that, we've talked about government's job is to protect liberty. Yeah. And in our Liberty podcast, the episodes we did on the concept of liberty, which we invite our listeners to go listen to if they haven't yet, we define liberty this way. Liberty is not a license to do whatever you want. Instead, liberty is the ability and responsibility to do what God says is right and good, and to enjoy all that God has given individuals to enjoy without oppression or tyranny, whether from individuals or governments. Nice. Right? So it's that protection, and government's job is to protect that. Cool.
So yeah, that just leads us to this whole idea that government bears the sword to punish evil and promote good, to be God's servant for our good, not grant rights and liberty. And I think that's really important. And we touched on this a little bit in the last episode when we talked about the collectivist societies and the totalitarian governments. And even a secular view of government is that government grants rights. No.
Yeah.
As we've just discussed, government has derivative power from God, from the people, from the law.
Yep.
That they are not to grant rights. They don't have that authority. It's not even close to something they're allowed to do. They're just to acknowledge that rights are there, that God has already created them and given them to people, and to protect those rights.
Yeah.
Right?
Which I think that's so cool, because like when you acknowledge the fact that government's authority is derivative in the first place, then you can start to understand why its role is to not grant rights and liberty.
Right.
Because you're like, it doesn't even come, like the government is not the authority on everything anyways.
Right.
And I think that's probably why in a lot of like, modern or secular ideas, why that gets reversed, because it's like, if there's no basis for morality, there's no basis for objective truth, well, then the government's responsibility is to define objective truth, or to define what I'm allowed to do.
And think about, you talked about the Nazis. That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
Getting away from the truth of the gospel and creating their own gospel. Right.
Literally.
Right. And just to everything we've talked about in both of these episodes so far, just to step back and think about it, right? Like, government, the concept in its proper jurisdiction is a wonderful thing. And it's good. And we should be thanking God for it.
Yeah.
Right? We thank God for our men and women who serve in uniform, whether it's in our military or first responders of any kind, who stand on the front lines, and we should be praying for them. The Bible tells us to pray for them and for rulers and authorities, right? And it's just, I don't know. It's this whole thing, like, we can get too caught up in the concepts here and not really let these things sink in, that these are truths.
Yeah.
These are things that God has put in his word for us so we would know and then be able to live a life that is flourishing, that is a blessing to ourselves, but especially to other people. Yeah. And that glorifies God. When we do this, when we submit to God and government submits to God, it's a blessing, and it glorifies him. Yeah. It massively glorifies him when we acknowledge that he is in fact King of Kings. Right?
Yeah, and it's cool because there's Tim Mackey from the Bible Project. He has a saying that I really like when he talks about the Gospels, or he talks about Jesus, and he says that, when Jesus calls his followers to do something, he actually expects them to do it. Wow. He doesn't just call them in some weird arbitrary, like, I'm just saying this to throw it out there, do with it what you will. Like, no, he's like, I'm calling it, like, love your neighbor as yourself. Like, it's a literal call to, like, do it, And that's the thing when you apply that to government, like how many times we mentioned that the Bible talks about government and command, or it calls you to pray for your leaders, right? To be somewhat engaged with this thing of government. It's like, it's actually a call, like, as a follower of Christ, is like, this part of it is to, like, be involved in it. You know what I mean? Not that it's like, wrapped up in your salvation or whatever necessarily, but that it's something that it's like, hey, like, as a follower of Christ, like, this is a good thing to be a part of, And
think about the guys who you said got together after the war and wrote that confession. It's out of love for neighbor that you stand up and hold government accountable while it's peaceable, while it's still within accountability. Yeah. That prevents the evils, like the evils of the Holocaust. It's doing it today. It's loving your neighbor today to do that, right? And it's the way we hold our governments accountable in this country is we get to vote. That's one way. And people can say, oh, I've voted all my life and it doesn't do anything. Well, it is a means And also means are actually going and talking to the people who are in authority. And something that's massively missing, and we'll actually be doing a series on here soon, is the concept of local community
government.
Self-government, right? Yeah. Right. It's self-government within your local community that you as the community then use your voice to talk to the people at differing levels of government. And when lots of us do that, lots of communities get together and do that, you start having some means to actually change some things. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time. That I can't wait to get into. That's something I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. So going back to government, government doesn't give or grant rights, but it acknowledges that rights exist from God, most importantly, and that government's duty is to protect those rights.
Yes. And so we've said it again and again, just like to sum it up and say it one more time. Government's job is not to be a provider. It's not to be a caregiver from cradle to grave. It's not almighty, and it doesn't have all power to do whatever it wants or whatever a few people think would be best. Just a whole idea on that. I would encourage our readers to read the book, The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek. I just finished it actually
today. You've been talking about this book a lot.
Yeah, he does a really good job explaining how these collective totalitarian societies, how they get the power and then what they do with it. It was eye-opening for me. It was great. So that's not what government isn't that. And as we've seen from what we've looked at through scriptures and seen case studies of in the Christians in Germany, what should government be is to be God's servant to administer justice, righteousness, equity, impartiality, and protect the safety, the rights, and liberty of the people.
Nice.
That's it. All under the authority of King Jesus.
Yeah. Right on.
So government is a blessing from God. Any closing thoughts from you?
No, I mean, I think, again, government being a blessing from God, the idea that as believers, we have some level of responsibility. And I think individually that varies in terms of like your involvement into like government.
Definitely.
But, there is sort of this thing of just like even praying for your leaders.